Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Lucy and this is the first in a series of 4 reviews I'll be doing on the music of the Blimp, or however that's supposed to be said. For the sake of these reviews I'll be using the name Blimp or Blimpy, or sometimes Blimples. As an introduction to the band I should point out that I know basically nothing about them, if it even is a band, or the background of the artist. Apparently there's 2 of them, but I've only interacted with one of them, so for all intents and purposes this might as well be a solo project. All I really know about the guy is he says dank almost every sentence, and he once said around 5 seconds of audio that I find hilarious.
I got a CD copy of The Downward Spiral by 9 Inch Nails.
We'll be starting with Kill Artist, an album released in 2020. Let's get into it. When you first listen to the music of Blimp, you're struck with an overwhelming sense of amateurness. Not to say that this is necessarily a bad thing. I think the term amateur has been given a bit of a bad rap over the years. Not to say this is necessarily a bad thing. I think the term amateur has been given a bad rap over the years. I always prefer to use this term in the sense that a fan of something has decided to make that passion a hobby, and that's exactly what I hear when I listen to Blimples. The guitars are a little wonky, the drums sound like they're not mixed at all, and the bass playing, if I can call it playing, is often out of time and clashes with the kick drum. However, I feel I'd be remiss if I didn't state that the album itself comes together stronger than the sum of its parts. I mean, every part is kind of below par, but the album itself sounds like it hits a solid middle ground between just good enough to be enjoyable, but not good enough to be judged alongside more professional peers. And that's okay really. The album opens with Mother Apple, drawing you in with its standard but pleasant guitar riffing, and then the biggest problem with Kill Artist rears its head only 10 seconds in. The bass guitar is out of time, and the drums are slowly lagging behind the beat. The vocals are reminiscent of someone's first attempts at singing, they're lacking in confidence, and the performance is often below average. But the mixing is surprisingly pleasant. The songs where the vocals are instead used to create an atmosphere, such in Bullet Made Vest, are surprisingly enjoyable. Ignoring the vocals themselves as a person singing, you can almost get lost in the melody. Almost. The drums are still a problem, however, and for someone like myself that's very sensitive to out-of-time elements, it really grates on the nerves. Unfortunately, this problem doesn't go away, and I've mentioned it twice now, so for the rest of the review, just assume that if I don't talk about the drums, then the same criticisms apply. Pleasant vocal melodies and spacey delays are all over the album. Oftentimes the guitar is competently played, which makes me wonder why the bass playing is often such a huge problem. It often feels like the bass itself gets lost in what it's supposed to be doing. In fact, not to go into a tangent, but Blimpy himself here seems to get lost into what he's doing. Oftentimes songs will just sort of end. There's no climax, there's no discernible structure. The best way I can think to describe it is like Blimples has wandered into a room to get his keys, his wallet, and I presume a huge amount of weed. He grabs his keys, he grabs his weed, then he forgets what else he's supposed to be doing. So he lingers around, tries to remember what he was doing, and he can't seem to jog his memory, so he just leaves. That's the music here summed up in one poorly written analogy. Blimp and his music is a guy wandering into a room and forgetting why he's there. There's some fleeting highs to be had. 1993, although suffering from the same problems as the rest of the album, doesn't outstay its welcome and complements the soundscape with some interesting guitar playing, diving in and out of different scales before, you guessed it, just kind of ending. The guitar work all around is surprisingly competent. I assume Blimp Chan is a guitar player, first and foremost, because the guitar playing is varied and never fails to grab your attention. It's just a shame that all the other elements are honestly such a mess. In an ideal world, this guy would be playing with a competent bass player and a drummer who knows how to stay in time and just kind of play off the guitar. I also get the impression that these songs have all the elements besides the guitar parts retrofitted into the mix. In other words, the guitar is the focus, and that's what they wanted to get across. In that case, I would argue that the drums and bass are superfluous elements, but in saying that, they are also surprisingly necessary in the style of music that Blimpy wants to play. The album takes a nosedive into rampant mediocrity, with lovely melody, however. A song the album could have really done without and doesn't do much to carry the album's flow. These sort of half-finished sketches appear twice on the album, and I'm not sure what their purpose was aside from bulking out the track listing. Neither of these do anything to help the album or its flow from track to track. If anything, it disrupts the flow, and would have been better placed being kept in a demo folder until Blimp Man decided he wanted to do something with them. As we cross the halfway point of the album with Danke Der, it's probably a good point to talk about the mixing and mastering. I've touched on this a little when talking about the bass, but there's a general muddiness to the entire album. Everything lower than 100 Hz sounds like that's indiscernible noise that's sometimes rhythmic and other times off-putting. But as we reach the mid-range, there's a lot of clashing frequencies as well, and just other such problems. I'm not sure if the album itself was actually mastered. Tracks will vary in volume by at least a few decibels. There's also no cohesiveness to the mix. Aside from some hard panning on the guitars, which actually goes a long way to making your brain accept the onslaught of frequencies. The vocals are often directly in the middle of the mix, and the bass sits alongside them, which unfortunately distracts you from the pleasant vocal melodies. To touch on the lyrics, they jump wildly between what I can only describe as nonsensical and surprisingly sentimental. I found the lyrics on Vicimo, Ocean of a Sky, and Skies Amid to be oddly captivating in their own way. I feel as though the lyrics themselves were bottom of the list of things to do for this album. There is occasional glimpses of something more cohesive and well thought out. Whether or not Blimpy Boy wants to admit it, he can write a good set of lyrics. There's one thing Blimpy McBlimp excels in, however. The sheer variety on display here is impressive. You never quite get a chance to relax because you never know what's coming next. Chopped up drums will slow down and speed up while you try to comprehend what you're listening to. Washes of reverb-drenched guitar and whispery vocals come and go while the Blimpy takes you to the far reaches of his repertoire. This is indeed one of the strengths of Kill Artist, but it is just too long to be a net positive in the grander scheme of things. If Kill Artist were trimmed down to, 10 tracks, and instead more care were taken, this could have been one of the great underground albums in 2020. Unfortunately, it fails by being dragged down by its less enjoyable numbers. So that brings us to the conclusion. Should you listen to Kill Artist by Blimp? I'd argue that yes, you should. If you take the album for what it is, and you'll find an enjoyable 30 minutes or so. Does it hold up on repeated listens? Well, I guess that depends on your taste. If you can look past its flaws and you can connect to the music, you'll find something that has perhaps been overlooked by a lot of people. And just like I had the Blimp song, this review is just going to kind of end as I wander off and forget what I was supposed to be doing.